What would drive someone to kill the person they just promised to love forever? Imagine the shock, the betrayal, when just days after a wedding, a life is taken, forever changing the lives of those left behind. This is the chilling story of Jane, a woman who shocked everyone when her 54-year-old husband, David, was found dead, only days after they exchanged vows. No one expected what would happen after the wedding cake was cut, and the couple danced their first dance. What drove Jane to commit such a heinous act? And what really went on in the days leading up to his death? Stay with me as we break down the events leading up to this tragic loss and uncover what truly happened in the days after their wedding. This case left everyone in shock, and by the end, you might just question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Welcome to Inside True Crime Stories, where we dive deep into chilling cases, unsolved crimes, and the dark side of human experience. Join us as we uncover hidden truths and explore the twisted corners of the criminal world. Thanks to our loyal viewers and subscribers for your support. We're grateful for your likes, comments, and subscriptions, which help us share these shocking stories and unravel mysteries that impact our lives. Subscribe and join our growing community to stay updated on gripping cases. Let's get started. Jane and David's story began like so many others, with a chance encounter that felt like destiny. It was a warm summer evening when they first crossed paths at a mutual friends gathering. From the very beginning, there was an undeniable spark. Jane, in her quiet grace, and David, with his confident charm, seemed like a perfect match. They quickly became inseparable. They traveled together, shared long conversations about their dreams and aspirations, and found comfort in each other's company in ways that others envied. For all outside observers, their connection seemed effortless. It was the kind of relationship people talked about when they wanted to believe in true love, one that appeared flawless, destined to last. As time passed, their bond only deepened. David, a successful man in his mid-50s, had lived a full life before meeting Jane, but something about her rejuvenated him. She made him feel young again, giving him the excitement and passion he'd been missing. Jane, on the other hand, found in David not just a partner, but someone who understood her on a level no one else had. They seemed to complete each other. Their engagement was a natural next step, a beautiful proposal that took place on a quiet evening at the beach, where David bent down on one knee as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold. Jane, overwhelmed with emotion, said yes without hesitation. It felt like the next chapter in the fairy tale they had created together. Their wedding, just a few months later, was nothing short of spectacular. Family and friends came from far and wide to witness their union, the elegant ceremony unfolding with a picture-perfect atmosphere. Jane looked radiant in her white gown, and David, standing at the altar, was a proud man, beaming with joy. The guests spoke in hushed tones, marveling at the beauty of the moment, the perfect couple, the happiness that seemed to fill the air. Everyone thought this was the beginning of forever. The vows they exchanged that day were supposed to be eternal, sealing a future built on love and trust. But as the night progressed, no one could have predicted that something so devastating would unfold in the coming days. Underneath the surface of this storybook romance, there were cracks that no one had noticed. Jane, with her bright smile, had a past that David didn't fully know, a past that she kept buried deep within her. And though David had opened his heart to her completely, he couldn't have known what lurked behind the woman he thought he knew so well. Despite the lavish celebrations, the toasts, and the laughter, something much darker was unfolding beneath the surface. Questions were already starting to surface in the corners of Jane's mind. How far would she go to keep her secrets hidden? What lengths would she go to escape the reality she had found herself in? The perfect facade they had worked so hard to maintain was about to shatter, and no one, least of all David, could have seen it coming. The days after their wedding, which should have been filled with blissful moments and memories, were marked by tension and deceit that no one could have predicted. It was only a matter of time before things started to unravel. It was a crisp morning just a few days after the wedding, the kind of morning when everything should have still felt fresh, exciting, and full of possibilities. But as the sun began to rise, it was anything but ordinary in Jane and David's home. What should have been a day of new beginnings quickly became one of the most shocking and heartbreaking moments anyone could have imagined. David was found dead in their luxurious home, just hours after he had spent the night with his new wife. The news came as a gut-wrenching shock to family, friends, and even the neighbors who had only just witnessed the joyous wedding days before. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and celebration, was now silent, eerily so. The scene inside was chilling. David was found in the master bedroom, lying motionless on the floor next to the bed. His body showed signs of a struggle, but the cause of death wasn't immediately clear. The only thing anyone could confirm at that moment was that something was terribly wrong. The air felt thick with the suspicion that someone had crossed the line, someone close to him, someone who should have been his most trusted ally. As soon as the police arrived at the scene and the investigation began, it became clear that this wasn't going to be an open-and-shut case. The house, once full of love and laughter, had turned into a crime scene. Investigators worked tirelessly, combing through the evidence, trying to make sense of David's untimely death. The first questions arose quickly: who could have done this, and why? And, more urgently, how was Jane involved in all of this? The detective started by speaking to Jane, the last person to see David alive. Her account of the night before seemed shaky. She described the evening in vague terms, mentioning that they had spent time together, but she couldn't remember much about the hours before he died. There was no obvious sign of struggle between the couple, no hint that anything was wrong, she claimed. She said they had gone to bed like any other night. But as the police pressed her for more details, her story began to change. First, she said she'd fallen asleep quickly, but then, she said she'd stayed up late watching TV. Was she confused, or was she hiding something? As detectives dug deeper, they began to uncover details about Jane's past that raised serious questions about her innocence. It turned out that Jane had been married before, but her first marriage had ended in an unexpected and tragic way. Her previous husband, a man named Charles, had died under mysterious circumstances just a few years earlier. At the time, the authorities had ruled his death as an accident, but now, looking at Jane's history in a new light, they began to wonder whether there were more unanswered questions surrounding his death than they initially thought. Were the two deaths connected? Could Jane have been involved in both? The similarities between the two cases were too striking to ignore. In addition to her past, the investigation revealed some inconsistencies with Jane's recent behavior. Neighbors reported seeing Jane acting strangely just hours before David's death. One neighbor even claimed that she had overheard Jane arguing with David in their driveway. What was the argument about? And why hadn't Jane mentioned it during her interviews with the police? Surveillance footage from a nearby store raised even more doubts. Security cameras caught Jane leaving the store late at night, just hours before her husband's body was discovered. She appeared agitated, her eyes darting around as if she was trying to avoid being seen. What had she been doing? And why had she acted so suspiciously? The more the police uncovered, the more Jane's alibi began to fall apart. As investigators began interviewing people who knew her, a disturbing pattern emerged. A key witness came forward, a close friend of Jane's, who revealed that Jane had been talking about getting out of her marriage to David. According to the friend, Jane had confided in her just weeks before the wedding, saying that she was having doubts about the relationship, that she wasn't sure if David was the right man for her. Why would she say something like that if she truly loved him? The twists didn't stop there. Another revelation came to light when police examined Jane's phone records. They found a series of unsettling text messages between Jane and an unknown number, messages that seemed to indicate a deeper connection, a connection that didn't fit the image of a loving wife. It was as if Jane had been hiding something, or someone, at the time of the murder. The plot thickened even further when a forensic analysis of David's body revealed something unexpected. While there were no signs of blunt force trauma, the autopsy showed traces of poison in his system. Could Jane have poisoned him in the days leading up to his death? The thought was chilling. Was this murder carefully planned, or was it a crime of passion that spiraled out of control? And if Jane had poisoned him, how had she done it without anyone noticing? As the investigation progressed, the contradictions in Jane's statements became harder to ignore. The police now had a web of evidence that pointed more and more to Jane being involved in her husband's death. But why would a woman kill the man she had just married? Was there a financial motive? Did she stand to gain from his death? Or was it something darker, a moment of desperation, regret, and rage? With every new piece of evidence, the mystery surrounding David's death grew more complicated. And yet, there was still so much that didn't make sense. As the pieces started to come together, one thing became crystal clear: Jane's involvement in her husband's murder was no longer a question of if, but how. And that question was still waiting for its answer. What had once been a joyous occasion, a beautiful wedding, had now turned into a nightmare. Family members, who had celebrated with the couple just days before, were now left in shock, unable to comprehend how their beloved David could fall victim to someone so close, someone they had trusted completely. David's sister, Maria, sat down with the investigators, her face etched with disbelief. She could hardly speak, the tears still fresh in her eyes as she recalled the wedding day just days before. "I can't believe it," she said, voice shaking. She was family, she was supposed to be the one to take care of him, to love him. How could she do this to him? Her pain was palpable, the anger and betrayal simmering just below the surface. For her, the loss of her brother wasn't just a tragic event, it was a devastating betrayal by someone who was supposed to cherish him above all else. David's best friend, Paul, couldn't make sense of the situation either. He had watched David's marriage unfold with excitement, even acting as the best man at the wedding. "They seemed so happy, so in love," he said, his voice low. "I just don't understand it. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jane was supposed to be his happily ever after, and now he's gone." But it wasn't just the immediate family who felt the sting of betrayal. The entire community, who had witnessed David and Jane's seemingly perfect relationship, was shaken to its core. What had happened to this once ideal couple? How could the woman who had promised to love David in sickness and in health have been the one to end his life? The emotional toll on Jane's family was just as severe. Her mother, who had supported her throughout her life, was left devastated. The woman who had raised Jane couldn't fathom the possibility of her daughter being involved in such a heinous act. "I raised her to be kind, to be compassionate," her mother said, her voice cracking. "I don't know who she is anymore. My baby girl couldn't have done this, could she?" As more evidence came to light and the investigators pieced together the timeline, a growing sense of disbelief and pain surrounded everyone involved. Family members clung to the hope that Jane had somehow been a victim of circumstance, that there was a logical explanation they could grasp. But as the details grew darker, that hope began to fade, replaced by a deep sense of loss and betrayal. Then, just as the investigators thought they had unraveled every clue, something unexpected happened. Jane, sitting in the interrogation room, her eyes red from crying, finally spoke. She had remained tight-lipped for days, refusing to open up, even as the police surrounded her with mounting evidence. But now, she was ready to confess. In a low, trembling voice, Jane finally admitted to killing David. "I did it," she whispered, the words hanging heavy in the room. The confession was shocking, but it was also a bombshell that raised even more questions. Why? What had pushed her to do it? Was it a crime of passion, a moment of uncontrollable rage? Or was there something more to it, something deeper than anyone had realized? "I didn't mean for it to happen," Jane continued, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't stand it anymore. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man I married." Her words were fragmented, her emotions a mixture of guilt and anger. But something in her confession didn't sit right. Was Jane truly remorseful, or was she trying to justify her actions? Was she telling the whole truth, or was she merely a pawn in a much larger, darker scheme, a scheme that no one had yet uncovered? The detectives were left questioning everything they thought they knew about the case. Was Jane telling the truth, or was this a carefully constructed story to cover up a deeper, more calculated plot? Could it be that she had been manipulated by someone else, someone with a much darker agenda? Or had she truly acted alone, driven by a deep-seated dissatisfaction with her marriage? The shock of her confession rippled through the room, and as Jane sat there, seemingly broken, the investigators knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The real truth behind David's death, behind Jane's actions, was still yet to be fully revealed. As the investigation neared its final stages, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. With the court case drawing closer, the chilling details of what really happened between Jane and David began to emerge. The detectives, now armed with an overwhelming amount of evidence, carefully pieced together the moments leading up to David's death. But the more they uncovered, the more twisted the story became. Jane's confession still weighed heavily on everyone involved, but doubts lingered. Was this a crime of passion, the desperate act of a woman scorned by a marriage that wasn't what she thought it would be? Or was there something far darker at play, a hidden agenda that no one had seen coming? As the court case loomed, the tension continued to build. The prosecution painted a clear picture of betrayal, but Jane's defense team was quick to cast doubt on her confession. Was she truly guilty, or had she been manipulated into taking the fall for someone else? With each new revelation, the courtroom became a battleground. The truth seemed just out of reach, but one thing was certain: this case would change everything for those involved, forever. Was Jane a cold-blooded murderer, or had she fallen victim to something much more sinister, a force she couldn't escape? The final revelation would soon come, one that would finally answer the question: what really happened between Jane and David? Do you think Jane was really guilty? Or is there more to this story than we'll ever know? Could there be something we've missed, or was this just a crime of passion? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're intrigued by the twists in this case, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. We'll see you in the next one.